So I promised everybody a trip report, okay, from my, actually, it wasn't my last experience. It's now my second to last experience. I've had an experience in between this. But I promised I would go around and show everybody, talk about what happened and show you where it happened and all this stuff like this. And this is the trip report that I say broke me, okay, and it did. This experience itself was not what broke me, though. It's the integration and synchronicities and stuff that happened afterwards. Usually synchronicities and stuff like that and all the integration validates my experiences in unbelievably amazing ways. This time it actually went completely against what I experienced to a degree. There's a theory that one of my friends proposed to me that I just was reading the signs wrong, and I now kind of believe that, but we're going to cover all of that in the unpacking episode. For now, we are going to get into the arguably it may be the most impactful experience I've ever had, including the groundbreaking episode of Trip 5, The Answer, or even Trip 10, Beyond Infinity. This is, if not the best, it's like number 2. Okay, this is significantly amazing stuff. And just to give you a quick backstory here, my wife and I were going through IVF and spending a lot of money, and money is one thing, don't get me wrong, but the loss of your embryos, your precious embryos, is like having a miscarriage. And that's practically what we had. We had these amazing signs and synchronicities that we were going to hear the heartbeat of my daughter, Julia. That episode is right here. It's amazingly heartbreaking and beautiful. And we didn't get the heartbeat. And so it was a rug pulled out from under you moment. And I had this crisis of faith of like, hey, do I trust the signs because they're abundant and prominent, or do I give up hope? And so we went in for a second ultrasound for that purpose. It's like I'm trusting the signs here. We went in, and sure enough, there was no heartbeat again. In that visit, our doctors, strongly suggested that we do a DNC operation, which is where they surgically remove the fetus. And if there was any hope for life before that, once you do that, that's it, right? And he says you have to make a decision on this by 2 p.m. Okay, so this is a big deal, and I'm like, okay, well, can we go home? And we went home, and it was decision time. And this is a terrible time for someone to decide to do psychedelics, but I did, because both me and my wife, actually, even though my wife is kind of upset about this whole psychedelics thing, she she's sick. It's been 3 years of this psychedelic stuff, and she already kind of, didn't believe in it already, like all the significant mystical kind of stuff. But now that we've had these signs that didn't prove to be true, she now is kind of upset with it. But she, like me, wants an answer here. It's like, whatever the things that told you that you were going to get a daughter with a heartbeat and everything, go and talk to them and see what the hell happened. And so that's what happened. Okay, I came home and I took a undisclosed amount of mushrooms. I'm not going to tell you how much, because you honestly wouldn't believe me based on the things that I saw. But anyway, I came into this room because I wanted to see this plumeria plant that was a very integral part of an experience I had with Jesus. From this episode, if you recall, Jesus spoke to me through this plant that's right outside here. But here's the thing. I went to go look at that plant, I undid the blinds, I opened the blinds, and I'm looking for that plant. Because remember, Jesus spoke to me through that plant, saying that he is life itself. And the plant obviously is life. And not only that, but that plant was gifted to my wife by her friend who had passed away. And he was such an amazing, awesome person. It's a perfect symbol for that. But when I closed my eyes while looking at this plant, when Jesus is telling me he is life itself, like, don't talk to death if you want to talk to me, he said, talk to life. And when I closed my eyes, when you stare at something bright for long enough and then you close your eyes and then you have like the negative image like kind of burned into your retina, I had the image of that plant, and then just like one of those 3D magic eye poster thingies, the face of Jesus Christ appeared through that. And so this I wanted to get the trip started off correctly. So I went and I looked, I opened up the blinds, and this is what I saw. Boom, nothing. The plant was right there before. It had that amazing experience with it, and now it's not there. And so I had this freak out moment where I was like, I have just ruined the start of this trip. I mean, I wanted to get it kicked off with life because, we're trying to grow life in my wife's womb right now in the form of my daughter, and this would have been perfect, and I'm like upset. But then I realized that we moved that plant. We moved the plumeria inside. Anyone who raises plumerias or whatever knows that during the winter time, they can't take the cold well, right? So you move them indoors and you literally strip all the leaves off of them and then pull them out of the ground and shake all the dirt off, and you lay them somewhere on the ground. Like my wife used to lay it in our garage, and when we kind of ran out of room in our garage, she started just laying it on the ground in our den here, and that's exactly what she did. And then I was like, oh yeah, I remember now. And so I walked back in here to the living room where I kind of started the experience, the den rather, and the den rather is almost what that sounded like. But I came in and I remembered where she had put it, which is right here, and this is where I had my first beautiful moment, because this is what this plumeria looks like in the moment here. It was laying right here, and I'm going to show you a picture of the actual moment, what it looked like. I don't know about you, but that looks like a dead piece of driftwood. That looks like something you would find on the beach and start a fire with. And to add even further insult to injury here, it's wrapped in a black trash bag, signifying symbolizing a body bag. I mean, this thing looks like death itself. And when you are hoping and praying that the embryo of your little daughter Julia is going to have a heartbeat, the last thing you want to look at and kick off your experience with is death. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm starting to get sad because it's not the big tall tree with blooming beautiful flowers come out of a plumeria, y'all. And that's what I saw when Jesus spoke to me. And now I'm looking at this thing that looks deader than anything I can imagine. And in the moment, it's almost like it's signifying my relationship, my soiled relationship with the divine and Jesus also, because I had been slipping up a little bit on my addiction. And I'm like, here we go. I screwed this all up. But then the back part of my brain, I remembered this thing is not dead. And that's when I had this unbelievable, this voice call out to me. And I don't remember if, I can't tell you if it was my voice or something from beyond. People always say on psychedelics, you're not talking to something else, you're talking to yourself. I think it's both. I think you're talking to something else through yourself, and it might as well be yourself. But regardless, this voice, it said to me, sometimes something that looks dead can be very much alive. And I don't remember if it was looks dead or seems dead. It doesn't really actually matter whether the words were looks dead or seems dead, but it was, the conveyance was that sometimes something that seems dead can be very much alive. And this crippled me. It was one of the most beautiful, soul enriching, inspiring things I've ever heard in my life. It's like if there was ever a time to give up hope, it's not now. Well, I know very well that this plumeria is alive and well. And the second that we go, in the springtime and plant it back in the ground, I'll see those beautiful flowers and leaves and stuff again. It was absolutely unbelievably amazing. And so I'm sitting here just kind of like contemplating that. And, a lot of time has passed. It seems very new in the experience here, but we're talking probably about 20 minutes or so of all this happening. And I said, I need to use the restroom, number one. And so I come in here to the restroom. The light was on. Let me turn that on. And by the way, this is the same restroom, y'all, with the trip number 5, The Answer, where God looked at me and told me that life is a joke and all this stuff, and evil is The evil can snake its way into you through these innocent channels and everything. Go listen to that episode if you haven't yet. But anyway, I come in here to the restroom, and guys, take note of this. When you are inebriated, going number one while standing up, accidents can happen. All right. So whenever you're inebriated, it behooves you to, check your man card and sit down. And so that's, sorry to get too graphic here, but I sat down on the toilet, and I actually had this moment where I was like, I want to experience this intensely. I'm going to turn the lights off. Right. So I turned the light off. I'm going to adjust the darkness here real fast. Give me a second. There we go. I'm also going to open the door a little bit. So, but it was this dark. Yeah, I mean, the light was off, the door was closed, but so that we can see something, I'm going to open the door a little bit. Anyways, I'm in here in the restroom, and to the right of me here is this void where the shower is. And when you're on psychedelics and you look into something like that, y'all, it is terrifying. And that's exactly what that was. It was like this infinite void over here. And I started hearing these voices that were kind of screwing with me. I've never, until about 3 or so experiences ago, I've never encountered these machine elf jester kind of clowns that like to screw with you and and that kind of stuff. They can tell you, and they usually do, they'll tell you this amazingly beautiful stuff, like to kind of hook you in and rope you. And then right at the peak of the beauty of what they just told you, they'll say something kind of messed up and to screw with you. And that's exactly what happened here. I was getting these voices talking about the sanctity and sacredness of life, and how beautiful and precious it is. And I'm getting all emotional because, again, this whole thing is about my daughter. And right at the peak, right at the zenith of these beautiful messages about life, this voice, it kind of said, yeah, right. Just kidding. Life is a plague. And then he says, furthermore, God only creates life so that he can destroy it. Really messed up. And then he added on to that, tacked on to this, a little personal kind of punch in the stomach here. He said, God created Julia, my daughter, just so he could kill her. And this pissed me off big time. And I remembered this technique that a friend of mine, thank you, Sergio, taught me, called oming, where you ohm, and it's a spiritual rocket ship is what it is. And so I did my oming routine, and I did it about 12 times, and I feel like I launched past these kind of lower vibrational nasties, that the bottom dwelling parasites down there. So I launched past that, and when I did, I darkness, of course. I saw some things that's not worth mentioning. It's just kind of menial, kind of commonplace psychedelic stuff. But I heard a voice coming from the void over here. And again, this was infinite darkness over here. Might as well have been. And I heard a voice that said very calmly, it said, look at me. And it didn't say it in a threatening manner. It just was what it was. But it was coming from this dark area, and so I was like a little freaked out. But regardless, I looked over, and I saw. It's hard to explain what I saw. It's impossible to explain what I saw. I can't. Even if I remembered what I saw, I wouldn't be able to tell you what it was, because it was cosmically Lovecraftian kind of cosmic horror kind of stuff. There was some kind of geometry involved, but all of that in total still encompassed this infinite nothing. Okay, y'all. And there's a difference between nothing and infinite nothing. I don't know how that distinction is, but anyways, that's what I saw and felt, was this infinite nothingness. But then it started saying things that made it a little more terrifying. It said, do you like what you see? And I said, no, I don't. And it basically said in so many words, something like, too bad. This is where you belong. This is what you have made for yourself. You are going to be here for eternity, etc., etc. And I was like, I don't like the sound or looks of this at all. This is not a pleasant being. I tried my Jesus Christ test on it. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's like when you encounter some being and you're not sure what it is, or if it means you harm, or if it's good or what, you say Jesus Christ, and they usually disappear if they mean you harm. If they hang around, the next thing to ask it is what is your opinion about Jesus Christ, and this kind of gives the entity enough rope to hang itself with. It'll let you know. In its description of what it thinks about Jesus Christ, it'll let you know pretty quickly what it really is. And so I asked it, what is your opinion of Jesus Christ? And he basically said, I know Jesus quite well. And but then this is what really scared me. He says, but he's not here right now. I am, and you're going to have to deal with me. And I said, oh, no. I'm not liking this at all. I was like, this is really scary. And so I got up out of the restroom. I'd of course done my business, and I get out of the restroom. Let me fix the brightness again. 1 second. So I come out of the restroom. I come into this room, and this is what I'm wanting to look at right here. Jesus Christ, right? And so I come in there, and because it's, once you start to get deeper into psychedelics, it actually becomes harder to move around. So the very first thing I did is I grabbed this chair and sat it down right here. Sat it down, and I came and I sat down right here. And the entity from the restroom, it came in here. I don't know if it materialized through that wall or if it just kind of popped in here or what, but it came in, and y'all, it was huge. It was, it took up the entire room, like, and even like poked up above it and went down below. It's like, this thing was absolutely huge, and I got a much better look at it this time. And what I can tell you is that it was these overlapped triangles that were iridescent and translucent as well, and kind of had this rainbow shimmer to them, kind of like an oil slick or like the surface of a soap bubble kind of thing. And it was massive, absolutely massive. And I can't tell you what was in the center of it. It was very complicated, but with these overlapping triangles, almost looking like dragon scale kind of like thing, I could see how someone could interpret that as feathers. In fact, I could see how this would look very much like a biblically accurate seraphim, which you're seeing right now. Now, granted, I didn't see eyeballs to my recollection, but again, whatever was in the center of it was very complicated, and I can't tell you what that was. I know it wasn't a humanoid though, like a cherubim, like what you're seeing now. I didn't see that. I didn't see a humanoid, because that thing has like a humanoid kind of face or something. I didn't see anything like that. It was just a very complicated looking, overlapping, dragon scale looking, trippy thing, a bunch of triangles looking like wings. And so it was quite beautiful, honestly. Intense. And this thing, when it came in, y'all, was angry. It came in and it started scolding me, and very intensely so. It basically was saying, do you know what you've done? Because I mentioned I slipped up on my addiction earlier. You blew it. Not many people get the opportunities that you get. You were talking to God and Jesus, and then you squandered that. And I hope it was worth it and stuff like this. And I kept saying, I'm sorry. It was really getting too much. It was getting yelled at by a cosmic being that is absolutely ginormous and huge, y'all. It was like getting beat up. It was like getting the floor mopped with you. It's like Mike Tyson in his prime versus your average 2-year-old kind of beating here. And so I eventually said, hey, I've had enough of this. I don't know who the heck you are, but I want to talk to Jesus. And as I'm leaving, this thing says, you know exactly who I am. You summoned me this morning. Which, as I'm rounding the corner, I'm realizing, like, oh yeah, I woke up at 4 a.m. like I did every day and lead up to the ultrasound and stuff, and I prayed. And this last time that I prayed, a friend of mine, even though I don't believe in guardian angels per se, I mean, I kind of do now because of this experience, but I didn't believe in guardian angels, y'all. A friend of mine said, pray that you'll get assistance and guidance from your guardian angel, and I was like, why not? What harm is that going to bring if I have further assistance? So even though I didn't believe, I prayed, and this thing is now here yelling at me. And so I have this thought of, oh my God, this is my guardian angel, as I'm coming and sitting down here on the couch, shielding myself from the yelling. And I'm here, I'm covering my head, and it keeps saying, look at me. And so I look up at him, y'all, and it's an actual direct line of sight with this. And this, y'all, is an angel. An angel holding none other than Jesus Christ. That's Jesus Christ right there. If you can kind of see that. And then there's an angel holding him. And I inherited this statue from my grandmother when she passed away. And so the angel is perfectly in the direct line of sight of that. And it's, again, monstrous. It's covering the whole room. It's so huge. And when I say that it's yelling at you, y'all, I mean, it's seriously like, imagine something so cosmically huge, like in your face, just like just almost like a pit bull in your face about to chew your face off, just like imagine that. Imagine like being strapped to a pole or something. You can't move or run or defend yourself, and there's a pit bull and that's quite telling, because the very next thing that he said really freaked me out. I said, hey, look, I'm done with you, man. I want to talk to Jesus. And he says, hey, Jesus doesn't talk to the likes of you, not after what you've done. Jesus sends in his dogs to do his dirty work, and I'm his dog. And again, you can see me goosebumping right now, y'all. It was terrifying. Okay. And what's even crazier is I'm now starting to try to kind of defend myself a little bit. And, because this is a cosmic being that's in God's upper echelon, apparently, if I'm to believe that it's an angel, a guardian angel. And so I'm kind of combating him and offering up an argument that, I'm human, right? And it keeps tearing me apart. But meanwhile, one of these synchronistic, amazing things is happening, just like what happened on the Cups trip. The episode is here, by the way, where my wife was listening to or watching a TV show, and things said in that TV show became part of the experience. My wife was upstairs watching Desperate Housewives, and two people were arguing in that show right when me and this angel are arguing, and the things it says to me, someone else on that show said at the exact same time. And then what I would argue back to the angel, the other character in the argument on that show was arguing back. It was very trippy. Not every single thing. It was probably like every other thing or every other third thing, but it was still like, wow, what is going on? Like really trippy, crazy stuff. And then he said something about, you offered your hand to Jesus and you blew it, right? But when he said the word hand, my wife had there was a commercial on for a moisturizing cream for hands or something like that, and they both said hand at the same. It was crazy, but it eventually that energy kind of started to die down. Like he had given me enough of a tongue lashing, and he calmed down. It's kind of like after if you fight with someone that you love dearly and you had to give them a little bit of tough love, you always kind of comfort them with a little bit of, with some comfort at the end of that. And that's kind of what this thing did. It basically calmed itself and said, hey, look, Andrew, a miracle is still possible here. He said, we wouldn't have put all these signs out there for you if they didn't mean something. He said, trust the signs. He kept saying, trust the signs. And then right when that happened, my alarm for my phone went off. It's now 1:58 p.m. I set my alarm for 2 minutes before we have to call the doctor with the decision on this DNC operation. To give me and my wife a couple minutes to deliberate and discuss what we're going to do. So I basically tell the angel, like, hey, look, thank you for that little pick me up at the tail end there, but I got to get going. We got to have this discussion. And as I'm leaving, it says, fight for your daughter, do the right thing, fight for your daughter. And I was like, of course I am. And as I'm leaving, y'all, this angel follows me. I'm going to see if I can orient the camera here. So imagine like the wings of an angel, like surrounding me as I'm walking up the stairs. I see those wings around me, wings again, quote unquote. And I'm walking up the stairs and I'm trying to be cool here because, again, my wife isn't so thrilled about this psychedelics thing. She never quite really, she believed in it somewhat, but now after these unbelievably amazing signs did not pan out, so now she's kind of pissed off. And so I got to be very careful here that I don't seem crazy because again, there's an angel following me, y'all. And it has its wings wrapped around me as I walk up the stairs, where my wife is sitting right there watching Desperate Housewives. And so I come and I sit down, I try to maintain my cool, and we duke it out. I mean, this is the first time we've ever had like an actual intense fight. We've only fought like maybe in 6 years, maybe 6 times, maybe like once a year, maybe less than once a year. But if there ever was a time to fight about something, and intensely so, it is right now. She wants to remove the fetus or the embryo. I want to keep the embryo. Now, granted, she's wanting to do that to pave the way for a new embryo. So she's still fighting for life. But I'm fighting for this life in particular. And so this is about as intense as it can possibly get. And we only have 1 minute, less than a minute and a half, basically, okay, to make this decision. So things got really intense and really heated. We've never really yelled at each other, really ever. And we didn't really yell so much so here. There was some raised voices to a degree, but it was more just crying your eyeballs out. It was really, really intense. And again, I have an angel that's taking up this whole side of the room, like this close to my face, like just right in my face, staring me down. I'm trying to keep my cool because, again, my wife is very sensitive to this psychedelics thing, but she still wants to know, what have you heard on this experience? Like, she wants to know why the signs didn't pan out either. Even though she doesn't really believe in this stuff per se, she wants to know, you know? And so I told her, I said, hey, I'm being told, trust the signs. She gets really upset and she's like, hey, I don't believe any of this, right? And that's when I kind of was like, hey, look, I totally get you. And I know this is a terrible time to bring it up, but I literally have an angel sitting right here and it's right in my face and it's telling me to trust the signs. And then I went into the plumeria story and told her about, sometimes something that looks very much dead can be very much alive. And that struck an emotional chord. So now she says, okay, she's siding with me now that I struck that emotional chord. And it's like, what do we tell the doctor? And that question, y'all, very simple questions like that when you're on psychedelics can turn into a tailspin, an existential tailspin. And it turns into a full life audit to me. And I'm like, what do I want to tell the doctor? I want to tell the doctor my full story of my fall from grace and my return to grace, nihilism and thinking that life is meaningless, to now I'm right here, right now, fighting for life itself. And I wish I could just send him every episode of my podcast and have him listen to every episode and have him guess what my answer is. But instead, I force myself to, I'm just like, hey, okay, just tell him we want another ultrasound instead of the DNC. And so she does, and it's this huge relief. I finally, like, we kind of both, we like sit back and it's almost like after a car crash or something that you've been in, where you have this like, what in the hell just happened kind of moment. Like the adrenaline was flowing so much and passions were ignited so much, and you just sit back and you're like, whew. But after things had kind of calmed a bit, I remember looking at my wife and just, again, we're in tears, and I just kept telling her, thank you, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. I went on to tell her how much I love her. I just said, I love you, over and over. And then I even went into like this 10 or 15 minute soliloquy, Shakespearean style soliloquy of my love for her. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever spoken in my life. I wish I could have recorded it so I could play it at a future anniversary or renewing our vows or something. It was so perfect. But at one point she laid down, and that's when something absolutely amazing happened. And I'm going to bring in a previous recording. The first time that I've recorded this trip episode like 4 different times. The very first time I talked about this next part, it was lightning in a bottle. So I got to play that for you. Here we go. And she's laying there right there on the couch, and she's laying down. She's looking up, and there's a beam of light that comes through the window right there, and it shines down on her. And when it shines down on her,
She looked like and sounds weird that I'm going to start crying about this, but you'll understand it. You'll understand it. She looked like an 85-year-old, maybe 90-year-old woman laying there. And I saw wrinkles and I saw like little spots and I saw this just white, grayish white hair, crinkly, and someone could look at that, an aged, withered woman, and say she's not beautiful. But what I saw was one of the most beautiful things in my entire life. She looked so beautiful. This radiant light falling down on her, and she was glowing, like literally glowing. Except she was an 85, 90-year-old woman, and I told her, I was like, "Oh my God, babe." I said, "Babe, I'm looking at you right now, and you look 90 years old." And she gave me this weird look. She's like, and I said, "No, babe, no. You look so beautiful. It's so amazing. Like, I'm seeing what you're going to look like when we're this old. You're going to be a grandmother. And you're not only beautiful, it's almost as if you're more beautiful." I can't explain it. My wife's a gorgeous woman, don't get me wrong, but there was something about this that was like she was more beautiful and more glorious. And I went on another long tangent about how much I love her. And I remember saying, like, I remember specifically saying, and this truly is true, how much I love this woman, y'all. I said, "You run my life," because she does. I said, "I found God because of you. You are the reason I'm a better person. So therefore you do run my life." And I told her, I said, "I will kiss the ass of any redneck a-hole that comes over here and makes fun of me and says that my wife wears the pants in the relationship. You know, Andrew, your wife wears the pants in the relationship and she rules your life." I told her, "I will get down, pull the pants down of said redneck and kiss his bare ass and say, 'Yes, my beautiful, awesome, amazing wife does rule my life, sir. And I'm proud of that. And I will kiss the other cheek of you to prove to you how much I'm proud of that fact.'" I said, what I said in the moment was way more articulate and made more sense. But it was something about, I said something like, "I am happy to kiss both of that guy's ass cheeks and tell him, 'Yep, my wife rules my life. What do you want, buddy?'" And I looked at my wife and I said, she's over there just kind of stoic and stone-faced. And I said, "Aren't you going to react?" Something like that. And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I just gave you one of the most amazing compliments of all time." And I was like, "You're not going to react to that amazing compliment?" And she says, "What, that I look 85 years old?" It was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life, y'all. Absolutely hilarious. I started cracking up. Out of all that stuff, all that amazing, beautiful stuff I said about her, she says that. It's like, what, that I look 85 years old? And I start cracking up, and I'm laughing harder and harder and harder. And I look over at her, and I realize that I'd overplayed my hand. I forgot that we just did a life and death decision, and we likely aren't going to, likely the fetus isn't going to make it, and it's dead. Like the embryo, the fetus, whatever you want to call it, is dead. And I realize I'm joking and I'm laughing way too much in the moment. And I look over at my wife, and she is now very sad again. It's disturbing, the amount of laughter coming from me. She may have chuckled a little bit, but it was like, hey, it's a little too much. And I remember saying to her, I said, I thought to myself, "Oh, Andrew, you just turned into a jackass at the wrong time to turn into a jackass." And I said, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was like, "Baby, I'm really sorry. Should I leave now? Like, I think I should leave, right? Should I just leave this room?" And she kind of nodded her head yes as she's crying. And so I got up. As I'm passing by these windows, though, I noticed that there were raindrops on the windows, even though it was not raining. Like, it was clearly not raining, right? And we're on the second floor here. It's not like there's a sprinkler system down there that somehow sprayed the windows. And plus, the raindrops looked different than regular raindrops. I don't know. They looked bigger, maybe a little more viscous, but there was not clouds in the sky. It wasn't like this dark, ominous feeling, like a rainstorm, like a thunderstorm would be, or anything like that. And again, the raindrops looked very different, very perplexing to me. I was like, that's interesting. But with her crying there, because that's what happened as I was leaving. She starts crying. I thought that maybe this was like a kind of a manifestation of that, of her crying, and the windows were crying as well. And so I came in here, and first of all, right off the bat, very first thing I noticed was the window in here. Same thing. Those tears that I mentioned before, those viscous, like raindrop looking, really thick tears. Very first thing I noticed, all the windows were doing that. But then, as I looked back at this mirror here, it was even more detailed, because not only was I closer, but I could just see more of it. And what it reminded me of is the center of the droplets. All right, was of course like a line, right? But surrounding that was almost like this Rorschach test ink blot pattern. And so you had these streaks, and they had that Rorschach ink blot kind of thing going on. It almost looked like the Shroud of Turin, or however you say it, the shroud that Jesus was buried in. It has those burn marks where it was folded or whatever, and that formed like a symmetrical pattern. It really looked like that. And so that was happening here. It was happening there. The windows were crying. And then when I sat down, I'm in full amazement. When I sat down, even this was doing it. It was quite trippy. And so, I'm taken by what's going on and all this, crying, and I start crying myself. And so I'm here with everything going on. I started crying, and I was crying for probably a good 5 minutes or so before I needed to use the restroom again. So I got up and I went in here, and again in here, same thing with the tears, like right here, those ink blot Rorschach Shroud of Turin tears. It sounds crazy, but it seriously looked like that. Tears happening here, happening there. The shower, any reflective surface had it. So I'm just like, wow, right? I go into the restroom, I do my thing, I come out. When I come out, everything is now crying, not just the reflective surfaces. I'm talking the walls are crying, and it was really creepy, y'all, seeing the walls cry. This door right here was gushing. It was like almost spurting out tears, and they were like just flowing and streaming. And I was trying to get a really good look at what was going on there with the door, and I came around and kind of peered at it from like this angle. And when I got right here, I noticed this double reflection here, where you can see the mirror back there in the background. And there was something about me being right here, the triangulation of everything. I saw the face of Jesus Christ and a cross there. So if you're familiar with these Facebook memes where it's like, hey, squint your eyes and you see a human face, it's like that they'll have a picture of like some dudes at a farmer's market, like picking oranges out of a basket or something, and then if you hold the picture out far enough and squint your eyes, you see the face of Jesus. Or it's not just Jesus. There's one where it's George Costanza, and then there's another one where it's Adolf Hitler. But usually it's Jesus. Like here's another example of a really interesting Jesus one with two girls, I think 3 girls even, with cups of coffee and whatnot. And so that's what it was like. So right here, Jesus, his face appeared through the room, and you're not going to see it now because it's just a cosmic psychedelic thing. You don't even try to look at it right now. You won't see it, but I definitely saw it in the moment. And it's very similar to what happened a lot of times on my experiences, but particularly Trip 7, The Conquering, where I said that God took shape from the room, like the room became God. That happened right here. That was right here. And just imagine, very similar to that Facebook like meme kind of thing of
looking at a picture of this right here and holding it out at a distance and squinting your eyes a little bit and seeing God. The only difference, of course, is that in that experience, God, or the room rather, which was God, imagine the room grabbing both sides of your face with two hands and holding your face and cradling you and saying, I will save you as he lets you go and drops you into hell. Very amazing experience. The link for that episode is right here if you haven't heard it. By the way, there's a beautiful thing that happens. There's a reason I had to go through that, and it's a beautiful thing. But anyways, that was amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm sitting here trying to get a connection with this face of Jesus that I see, and it's only there for maybe about 10 seconds before it kind of fades out. And I sit here for about another 10 seconds trying to see where it went. I'm looking all around, I can't find it. And so finally I'm like, again, it's exhausting when you're deep in psychedelics to even stand and walk. So I was like, I'm going to go sit back down. So I came in here and I sat back down. And so I'm sitting here, and it's as if the whole room is closing in on me, and like I'm being drowned by these tears that are everywhere. And it's really intense. And I had this feeling in the moment of, usually psychedelic users will talk about this interconnectedness with everything in the universe. And I felt this interconnectedness with everything in the universe, and everything was crying. All of existence, the entire universe, all of creation was crying, and crying through the person of Jesus Christ. Again, having seen his face and the cross in there, it was this deep connection there with everything and me, and so I'm now crying as well because of this intensity. And about that time, I detect and see a person enter the room. And it was in the corner of my eye, and it's one of those things where if you look directly at it, you don't see it. Anyone who's seen it, like a ghost or something like that, understands this phenomenon. It's like you see things, you see a human in the corner of your eye, and you look, and it's not there. But what I did see when I looked directly at it is this kind of like smoky, kind of fractal smoke enter the room. But along with this was this proprioception of, you can tell when there's another person in the room with you, even if you can't see them sometimes. And so I felt this presence. And this presence, y'all, it's the best way I can describe it. Anyone who's had a Jesus encounter understands how earnest and sincere he is, and how intense he is with that earnestness and sincerity. It's the highest level of earnestness and sincerity you could possibly imagine. And I'm going to stop short of saying stern, but there definitely isn't. There's definitely this. There's no time for tomfoolery, for joking around, for there's a job to do, and we need to be serious here. There couldn't. The stakes couldn't be higher. Okay, kind of thing. But at the same time, with this intense earnestness and sincerity and intensity overall, there's an infinite well of tenderness and love there at the same time. It's the most unique presence I've ever encountered. Unbelievable. But as it approached me, I'm crying, of course, and it says, "Andrew, why do you worry so?" And because I know you can't hide anything from God, and because I know he wants 100% honesty, I said, "I worry because I'm a human being." There's a lot of intense things going on in my life right now, the most intense I've ever had. And if there ever was a time to worry for me right now, it's right now, and I added something to the effect of, you have to understand this. I just saw and understood and had a mind melding with you that you cried all the time, which means that you are very much a human being. And so I flipped it around on him. I said, you ask me why I worry. I ask you, why did you cry all the time? And I'll never forget this. This is one of the most heartbreakingly beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. But before I get into exactly what he said, let me first explain and actually play the raw audio
of an experience I had with God. I don't do an episode for every one of my experiences, but I do record most of them. I had this encounter with God, and we were talking about suffering in general, and how and why people inflict suffering on each other. And this is what God told me.
It's almost as if God's saying, I don't blame you for getting what you thought you needed. He said blame. He's basically saying blame is no part of this. Just flush it out of your head. People do things to people, and it's because we're stuck here. And God is calling to every single one of us, and some of us don't listen, or we're not paying enough attention. And we may never understand why it has to be like this. But God is basically telling me he gets it. Of course he does. You created this. I feel your pain. It's like he says he feels my pain because he's felt it himself through us. He's felt it himself through us. And so when we hurt people, we're hurting him. And we're hurting ourselves too. That's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. He says, I know. He said, don't worry, I've done something about it. Don't cry for me, he says.
And so, in keeping with that message, he said to me, I cried for the pain that I felt in the world. Incredibly heartbreaking, because I knew that he felt our pain through us. Not only did he see people have terrible things happen to them, but because he is literal life itself, he feels the pain that person feels when they feel it. And so it was a very intensely, heartbreakingly beautiful thing to hear. And right at the depths of understanding that, he turned it around though, and he told me that there was another reason that he cried, and this, y'all, was just, it's one of those things that just again perfectly reflects his personality. He said, sure, he cried for the pain that he felt in the world, but he cried equally for the beauty that he felt and saw in the world as well. And that is so amazing, because from the beginning of my psychedelic endeavors and stuff like that and finding God, it was always clear to me the message of we share in the divine spark. Like I always liken it to a river system, right? We are the streams and tributaries and estuaries that give rise to the river, and then the river gives rise to the ocean, and the ocean is God. It's like all of that water is still God, right? Now, granted, an estuary and a stream couldn't say that it is Challenger Deep, right, which is the most extreme place in the ocean that you can possibly imagine. But water is water, and so there's like a cherry tree. A cherry can't say that it is a cherry tree, but a cherry gives rise to a cherry tree. It's you can go, on and on with these self-referencing loops here. And so when he said that he cried equally for the beauty that he saw in the world, it was very apparent to me that he saw these godly acts of love and sacrifice and all the good stuff. And he, just like someone, I don't know, being moved by the most beautiful sunset they've ever seen in their life, or hearing the most beautiful song that they've ever heard, he cried at the beauty. It was an absolutely amazing juxtaposition, dichotomy, yin-yang of crying. And what's so amazing, y'all, about crying is the innocence of it. It's one of the most beautiful gifts that God has ever given us, in that when you really think about it, we share that same act, okay, with infants, for crying out loud. No pun intended. The innocence there is so amazing that even as an adult, you submit to crying. And it's such a beautiful, powerful thing. It's one of the most powerful things in existence. And trust me when I say that we're going to get deep into the concept of crying in the unpacking episode. There is a lot more there that is unbelievable. And the understanding of crying and why we do it and how it's effective in communication and understanding and all this other stuff. It paints just the perfect picture of who Jesus Christ was based on what we know through Scripture or know through our own personal experiences. Really, really amazing stuff, y'all. And so after absorbing that and crying with Jesus, y'all, I cannot describe to you how amazing that is to cry with Jesus. After that, wiping tears away and almost choking on my own mucus, I asked Jesus about this whole guardian angel thing. I said, hey, was that really my guardian angel? I prayed for it. It showed up. It was really intense. And, was that your work or not? And I'll never forget this, y'all. This is freaking crazy. This is one of the craziest things that's ever happened on any of my experiences is right when I asked that question about my guardian angel. My wife, who's listening or watching the show Desperate Housewives in the background in the room next to me here, someone on that show says the name Gabriel. Y'all, right when I'm asking about what's the deal with this guardian angel, I hear the name Gabriel. Okay, for you Muslims out there, Jibril. Okay, this is a big deal. This is a big. I call for my guardian angel, and the archangel Gabriel shows up. Now, granted, y'all, I did some research on that show, and I couldn't find a character named Gabriel. But maybe it was some peripheral character, like some kind of I don't know, extra or something like that. I don't know, but there is a main character in the show played by Ava Longoria, and her name is Gabrielle. And that's probably what I really heard. But regardless, y'all, I ask, what's the deal with this angel? And I hear Gabriel or Gabrielle. It's like, what? Like, wow. Right? Now, granted, Jesus didn't say that. In fact, Jesus didn't really answer my question at all. It was the TV that did in the room next door. And so I didn't get so much of a clarifying answer to that, but I was still like taken aback and like, holy moly, I cannot believe that the archangel Gabriel showed up and basically smote me downstairs before comforting me. But intense stuff. And I remember telling Jesus, I said, hey, he was saying something about obedience. How do I obey you? Right? This whole give you my hand. Like, what is that? Like, how do I obey you? And I'll never forget, right when I asked that question, there was a shadow that formed right here in the door. And it was a perfect like shadow of me. Like I could see my outline sitting right there, right? But it was like a spiritual version of me for some reason. It's hard to explain how I knew that. But this door was a barrier. On the other side was something spiritual, and there was a shadowy kind of figure of myself there. And this shadowy figure was sitting exactly how I was sitting. But once I understood it was me, it got down on all fours or whatever in the prostrate. Is that how they call it? Position. How Muslims do when they do their call to prayer. And I heard Jesus tell me, in order for me to understand how to obey, I need to understand what obedience means to him. And what he told me is something absolutely unbelievable. He says, so beautiful. He says, obedience works like this. He goes, he's like, you're obedient to me and I'm obedient to you. It's a two-way street. It's a reciprocal. But he said within that, in this mind meld, it was very apparent to me that how he repays obedience, how he is obedient to you is 10, 100, 1,000, a million, a billion, a quadrillion times more obedience. The give back that he gives is so much more than you can possibly imagine for us. And that was an absolutely beautiful message. But then I told him, I said, okay, But now, how do I obey you? You showed me what obedience means to you, but how do I obey you? And I'll never forget this. Right as he begins to answer this question, he starts to take form. And what I mean by that is, he was this smoky kind of vapor, proprioceptive kind of feeling someone's presence kind of thing. But when I asked him that question, he began to take form. And as he did, it everything kind of precipitated and coalesced into this smoke that became more human. Like, it was this smoky vapor before, but it was kind of formless. Now it started turning into this kind of as if you were shining a projection of somebody through smoke. You could see a person well enough in there. It's still a little bit distorted because smoke moves and swirls and stuff like that, but you saw the ghostly image of a person, and it was undeniably Jesus. It had the crown of thorns and the kind of tunic or whatever and all that stuff. And so when I asked it, how do I obey you? He kind of smoked up in his presence and started to kind of come into the doorway here. And he says, you do exactly what I did. And he goes, I'll never forget this, with his hand as he's getting crucified in the doorway, he says, you forgive everyone. With his left hand, he said, forgive everyone across the x-axis here. And then he said, and listen across the y-axis as he falls back into a crucified position. I just want to say that again. I asked Jesus Christ, how do I obey you? He says, you do exactly what I did. You forgive everyone and listen. And then he took form in the crucified manner right here in my doorway, again, looking as if it was somebody projecting an image of Christ through smoke. And what was amazing about this, that message blew me away. And I remember he assumed the crucified pose here. In typical fashion, he has his head down like this. And I wanted to look into his eyes. And so what I did is, being down where I was right here, I kind of like went like this to try to look into his eyes. And what happened was there was this almost like a prism. There was like a refraction where when you got at the right angle, there was a different version of him. There was a larger version, like a disembodied zoom in of his face that popped out to where there was two of him. There was the Jesus that was crucified up here, and then when you looked at the right angle, there was a larger version of his face that was staring right at you. And again, in that stare, y'all, the 1,000-yard stare of Jesus is something that can only be described as a personified version, in the flesh version of that presence that I mentioned earlier, that infinite earnestness and sincerity and urgency, no clowning around kind of thing. We don't have time for this. This is the stakes couldn't be higher. This is the most serious thing you can possibly imagine, while at the same time having this infinite well of love and forgiveness and all that stuff. It was unbelievable is what it was. But more unbelievable than just his presence there. And again, y'all, the crown of thorns and everything, I see it. It's all there. It's a sepia tone kind of smoky, ghostly projection through smoke version of that. Okay, unbelievable, like just out of this world. And then that disembodied head looking directly at you. You cannot describe it. And so I'm blown away by that, but I'm also mostly blown away, or more blown away, by what he said. Forgive everyone and listen is such a perfect description of what he did in life, in his human life. And if he's calling, me to do that, it makes perfect sense of be like how I was, to obey me. And I was blown away by the beauty of that. And I started crying, and I stood up and I said, can I kiss your feet, sir? And I started kissing the cross. And when I looked back up at him, though, I'll never forget, that look was a lot more serious. And there's no way I'm going to be able to replicate it, y'all. But it went from something like this to something like this. And it wasn't a mean look. It's just a lot more serious. And there was this terrifying moment in a sense that I understood the intensity and severity of what it means to forgive everyone and what it means to listen, right? Jesus kind of in this mind meld let me know that it's so serious to him that his hands are permanently nailed into an embrace of forgiveness. That's how serious he is about this. And his feet are permanently nailed to where he can't run away from anyone if someone comes and starts offloading their baggage, right? He's going to listen to you no matter what. You want me to prove it? Right? And all of a sudden, the violence, the understanding of that violence there, of like having nails driven through your hands and feet, was a symbol of how intense, not even a symbol, it's a direct reflection of how intense this act of forgiving everyone and listening can get. And this guy paid the ultimate price for forgiving everyone and listening. And when I start thinking about that, I start thinking about stuff I've already learned on previous experiences, like trip number 10, Beyond Infinity, where I talk about, if you had a family member who died in 9/11, it's like, if you came across Osama bin Laden, it's our duty to not only forgive that person, forgive Osama bin Laden, but embrace him and then wash his feet and then, I don't know, anoint his hair with scented oil and stuff like that. And, look at him and say, I love you like a brother, and et cetera, et cetera. And you have to mean all of this too. So forgiving is already insanely, you cannot possibly imagine how freaking insanely hard it is, especially think about that. Losing someone, if you lost your whole family in 9/11 and you ran across Osama bin Laden, providing he was still alive, would you be able to do that? Pretty dang hard, right? But I'll never forget, right after understanding how hard that is, and it's something that I've already understood before, but understanding this in the moment with Jesus looking you in the face is a completely different story. And at the peak of that understanding, then I started to understand this whole listen part. And this is where things got even more intense. Of forgiving someone is one thing. Let's imagine that you forgave Osama bin Laden and washed his feet and anointed his hair with oil and whatever, fanned him with a palm leaf or something and saying, I love you like a brother. Now you have to sit down and listen to his story. You have to listen to why. And here's the thing, y'all. Here's how everything turns around and hits you like a ton of bricks. You listen with so much intent. You're so invested in his story. You're so invested in him. You cry at his story. This is how impossible of a feat this is, y'all. It absolutely blew, and I knew and I knew instantly the intensity and severity of that. Not only from my side of the equation, right? It's like trying to listen to your worst enemy's justification for killing your whole family, and understanding this justification so deeply that you cry with your enemy. Y'all, wow is all I can say. But then it became even more serious when I realized that sometimes even just asking someone to offload their baggage to you there can be so much hurt and so much pain there that they are going to take it out on you, the person who asked, even regardless of how you could be their best friend, and you bring up a topic that is so sensitive that they want you to feel that pain too, and next thing you know, you're either mentally or physically injured, or like Jesus here, killed. Okay, this became insanely, incredibly serious. It wasn't this hippy dippy, lovey dovey, hold hands while frolicking through a meadow singing Kumbaya anymore. This was the most intense thing you could ever possibly imagine to do in life, and this guy did the ultimate form of that. Okay, and was tortured and killed for it. And so It was extremely powerful, especially factoring in at this point a third Jesus appeared that was right about here, and he was holding down what I can only tell you is a cosmic being, and it's a cosmic being that I've encountered a few times on my experiences, and associated with this cosmic being is always this hyper cosmic sense of doom, of the worst kind of doom, of the worst evil that you can possibly imagine, intent on ripping the whole universe apart and everyone's lives within it. It's like try to kill and maim as much as possible and destroy people's lives in the process. And on a universal, cosmic, beyond universal, multiversal, and beyond scale, like you cannot even imagine how intense this thing that Jesus is holding down, and how angry and bitter and vile, and how much it wants to kill everything, and everything that I just said. Can't imagine. And when Jesus is there, of course, being in proximity to this nasty thing, as is typical, my face starts rotting off. I can literally probe around with my tongue in my mouth and feel that there's chunks of my mouth and teeth are missing, and I'm swallowing them, and there's blood. I could literally take my hand like this and rub it and see gore all over my hands, y'all. You go to touch your nose, and there's just a tiny little piece of cartilage there. You don't feel your nose anymore. It's been rotten off. Really disgusting stuff. And then, of course, it was throwing vomit at me and diarrhea, something, either or both. It was this brownish yellow fluid that you could literally feel and wipe off. You couldn't smell it, thankfully, but it was nasty. It was the worst kind of nasty you can possibly imagine. And wrapped up within this listen concept, again, Jesus is holding this thing down, but he's looking at me while he's holding it down. And the intensity of his eyes when he's looking at me while he's holding this thing down, it said it all. It basically said, be prepared to face this thing whenever you listen, right? And when I had that understanding, I started getting pulled down that cosmic nightmare of, y'all, you cannot even imagine just kind of barely peeling the onion, the first layer of the onion back on what that thing is, y'all. Whoo, buddy. Is all I can tell you. You can see me goosebumping right now. Like it's not a freaking joke, y'all. There's a reason why Jesus is so serious. I felt like I was going to die in that exchange and be ripped into cosmic hell. And while it's just incredibly intense. Okay, so I finally pulled out of that and kind of understood the gravity of the situation. And I'll never forget, as I'm sitting back down, I remember him saying, Andrew, people have misunderstood both forgiveness and hell. And this kind of piqued my interest, and I was like, what do you mean? And he said, and before I get into this, let me just briefly mention Dante's Inferno, right? There's that concept of there being levels of hell. Like you have, I think it was the people that have never been baptized at the top level. Then you have like adulterers, and then you go down to like rapists and murderers, and then at the very end of hell, at the very bottom is like the betrayers, right? And you got Satan's down there like chewing on Brutus, if I remember correctly, or something. And that's all kind of ridiculous per se, but I don't think that the concept isn't too far off, in my opinion. If you believe in something like hell, it's not too hard to imagine such levels, right, of stuff. And so Jesus said, there are no levels of hell, only levels of forgiveness. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to say it a little slower. Jesus said, there are no levels of hell, only levels of forgiveness. And that's all he said. But in the mind meld with him, what I got and gleaned from that is that human beings, okay, y'all, we tend to categorize and put restrictions therein on forgiveness itself. We flag people, right? In other words, what I mean by that is like, hey, I forgive you, but you're never allowed to talk to me ever again. You're never allowed to be around my family ever again. I forgive you, but I'm never inviting you to one of our softball games ever again. You can go down the list of categorized, flagged forgiveness that people put people in. And it became very clear to me that human beings have essentially built this hierarchy of, at the very bottom, there is absolutely not even a chance of forgiveness, so much so that the question doesn't even enter one's mind. It's like absolutely not even a question of forgiveness at the bottommost layer. Then the next level up is like, I'll consider forgiving you, but you're still not forgiven. And then so the question has entered my mind, but no. Then there's the next level above that, which is like, I forgive you, but if I ever see you again, I'm going to kill you, kind of thing. And then it's like, then we keep going up, and then eventually it gets to like, I forgive you, but I get to slap you in the face next time I see you, or something. Or I forgive you, but you're sitting out of the next fantasy football league meeting or something. I don't play fantasy football, but so you get the idea, right? Jesus conveyed to me, this is what he said next. I, through the mind meld, got that messagery, right? But the next thing he said to me is that he and God are at the highest level of forgiveness, where there is unconditional, uncategorical, unshakable, unflappable, everything. The highest form of forgiveness you can possibly imagine. It's like, not only are you fully forgiven, but everyone is fully forgiven, and you can wheel out all of the, like, again, unconditional, y'all, unconditional. And this played in perfectly and perfectly dovetailed into this whole concept of forgive everyone and listen, because the message was clear. If you're going to forgive someone, do not categorically forgive them. It's all or nothing. There is no halfway. There is no half anything on this, or even a quarter or a third, or even 75% or a 99.999999999%. It's nope. It's 100% all or nothing. The highest level of forgiveness that you can do. Period. That's the standard that he set, and that's the standard that he's calling at least me. Because he told me, how do I obey him? Forgive everyone and listen. And when you forgive everyone, forgive to the highest degree imaginable, uncategorically. So it's all or nothing. You don't. It's all or nothing. And about then is when we had this shift, this tonal kind of change, where Jesus is standing right there in the doorway, crucified. He now became. It became less intense in a way, and it became more of this. He's always accepting, y'all, but it really became this incredible, like, just, whew, I can't even tell you how accepting the presence was, and it embodied itself, this feeling of presence, as him being the flight attendant's person who checks you in to your flight as you go through the jetway onto a flight, and onto a plane that takes you essentially to heaven, right? And along with this idea, Jesus told me, he said, hey, we're going to redefine what winning is on this planet. When people talk about how well they're doing, how good they're doing, all this materialistic stuff, it's not what winning is. And he says it's very much like traveling here. He says, human beings, and this is a very interesting concept, because human beings never travel when they go somewhere. How can you call it traveling when you take possessions with you? He was like, we don't really travel. We don't leave who we are, what we are. We take these things that we think is us, and we take it with us. This kind of traveling, going to heaven, essentially, is the only kind of traveling that you'll have where you leave all of your baggage. And that's what this became. This is really weird what I'm about to explain. But
it's not as if he was wearing a flight attendant uniform, y'all. But this right here became, and there was a bag on it. There was like a piece of luggage, like a duffel bag that me and my wife had gotten back from a weekend trip or something when one of our duffel bags was still sitting here. And so this became almost like the baggage check area where you come and you check your baggage. Jesus says, "Hey, welcome aboard," and you get on the jetway and you go to heaven. And there was all this amazing angelic heavenly landscape behind him here. If you go look at the Pillars of Creation picture, it was stuff like that, but in a heavenly, beautiful way. A lot of amazing stuff back there. And he was again the guy who checks you in, and then the beautiful symbolism that you check your baggage at the gate, and the message that it's the only form of travel where you want to leave all your baggage. It was this unbelievably freeing thing. And once again, Jesus is the perfect person for this, because forgive everyone and listen. It's like, hey, I forgive you. Now tell me your grievances and your struggles, and let's cry it out together. And in so doing, you're leaving your baggage and you're getting on and going. But then there was this really critical, unbelievable message coupled with this. And it was this concept of summit fever, okay? I'm very fascinated with mountaineering. I've never mountaineered myself, but I watch a lot of documentaries about mountaineering. I'm very fascinated by Mount Everest and stuff like that. And what a lot of people who climb Mount Everest, there's this talk about summit fever is what they call it. And it's when you're so enthusiastic and so pumped up and so excited to climb all the way to the summit of Mount Everest. I mean, after all, you've spent tens upon tens of thousands, sometimes $100,000 or more to hike or to climb the mountain. Maybe it's your second or third or even fourth time, and you didn't hit the summit before, and now either way, there's all these different parameters and factors to where when you step foot on that mountain, because it's so hard, because you've paid so much money, because it might be your third or fourth time, it's like you are dead set and intent on climbing to the summit. Jesus showed me in this vision of this ethereal, heavenly gate check kind of thing. He showed me, it's like, hey, this is welcome. Anybody is welcome to this. It's like you're going to come and you're going to offload your baggage and you're going to get in the jetway and you're going to go to heaven. And no one, how do I put this? It's like it's perfectly okay. It's exactly what Jesus and God wants for us. But he said the real helpers, y'all, the ones, the real humanitarians out there, the ones willing to do the real, really intense, good, godly work, are the people that can go to this, gate check thing, offload their baggage, be forgiven by Jesus, and start to walk down the jetway, but then realize that there are people rummaging through their luggage that are still back here. The baggage handlers and stuff back here in this existence that you just left still need help. They're still tied to these possessions, and again, this analogy of them rummaging through your luggage. What Jesus showed me is that we shouldn't have summit fever, okay? Just because heaven is so enticing and we've put in so much work to get there, we can still turn around and help people, y'all. And that's exactly what happens on these Mount Everest excursions. Is a lot of these people who die, most of them, pretty much all of them actually, die of what's called hypoxia, lack of oxygen. And you become so lethargic that you can't even walk 20 feet to save your own life, y'all. They found people frozen solid, only like 100, maybe like 50 yards, 30 yards, I forget how many yards, but an easily walkable distance, like 20, 30 yards from their own campsite, because they are so lethargic they can't muster any strength to move. And people will literally, as they're watching people die of hypoxia, they'll walk around them because they have summit fever and they want to summit Everest, and people die.
I feel like that saving someone's life for me would be more awesome than summiting Everest. I don't care how much money I spent. If I saw someone dying, I would stop everything and dedicate the rest of my trip to making sure that person got down safely. But that's me. Jesus tells me we should not have summit fever. We need those of us who take the calling. We have the option to turn right back around, having stuck our nose into heaven and sniffed around. We have the option to turn around and help those in need. It was absolutely one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life, and it really calls into question, there's some religions out there who are very macho, and they do all this macho stuff so they can get to heaven and paradise. And I just want to kind of point out what machismo really is, what my definition and what Jesus's definition of machismo is you're given the option to go cash everything in and roll around in your mansion, right? Or like a man, you turn around and help others. I'll tell you what the manliest man that I've ever heard of, conceived of, or possibly imagined would do. I'll tell you what I hope to do in the right moment. It's that. Turn right back around and help others. Really unbelievably beautiful kind of thing, y'all. And so right about this time, one of these absolutely jaw-dropping, amazing, overlapping, synchronistic things that happens usually when my wife is in the room next to me playing a TV show, which happens on just about every trip because she's my sitter on just about every trip. And to pass the time, she's usually watching TV at a low volume, but it's usually not low enough to where I can still hear people talking, dialogue, or like loud noises like gunshots or explosions or music or laughter or applause. And like clockwork, every time something like that happens and sound leaks into this room, something will happen in the experience that perfectly coincides synchronistically or symbolically or metaphorically with what happened in that show. And some, these instances are sprinkled throughout this particular experience, ranging from minor to absolutely amazing major instances. One of the bigger ones, two of the bigger ones happened. One particular one was Jesus was talking to me. He said my name is what he said. I don't remember what he was talking about. This is one of the ones that I didn't record. I only started recording with my voice memo about 80% into the trip, so I missed a lot of these. But there was one in particular, I don't remember what Jesus was saying, but he said my name. He said Andrew, and in the room over, I heard the word Andrew, the name Andrew, and I was like, what in the world?
So when her son Andrew decided to stop drinking, Bree was pleased to see him follow those steps as successfully as she had.
And I don't know for the life of me why you would want to leave a room where the Messiah is talking to you. But for whatever reason, I guess I just wanted to follow my intuition and see if there was a massive sign about to be unfolded to me. I left the room and I went in there to see what was being played on the show, and this is what I saw.
Now I have to make the amends. And there's one person I've been really awful to.
Well, I know it seems difficult, but give it a chance. Some people are more forgiving than we give them credit for.
And so in one little clip, we have an addict named Andrew who is seeking forgiveness, and his mother sits down and basically challenges him saying, hey, look, you don't know how much forgiveness I'm capable of. Go ahead and try me, right? Which hints at this whole infinite plane of forgiveness, this unconditional, uncategorical level of forgiveness that Jesus wants us all to aspire to. This is playing out in that scene. Absolutely amazing to me. And then on top of that, what does she do? she sits down and listens to him, like she's prepping herself to listen. And so this covers the listen part too. Forgive everyone and listen. It's happening right there in that scene. Absolutely unbelievable. But that's not all that happened. That's not the only synchronistic thing in that scene. This also happened.
30 days sober. I am so proud of you.
I feel great, Mom.
And it gets better all the time. Just keep going to meetings and working those steps.
And y'all, I basically promised Jesus 30 days of sobriety, right? If you remember from that one episode where I was trying to figure out how one extends one's hand to Jesus in a gesture of, I want to be on your team, sir. And Jesus told me, if you give me 30 days, I will give you eternity. And so in that moment, I pledged that I would abstain from my particular addiction for 30 days. And then within that scene of addiction and Andrew and forgiveness and listening, I get a 30-day emblem, little button or whatever the heck that thing was, 30-day sobriety. It was absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe my eyes or ears. But then there was another one, like right after that symbolic vision of the jetway to heaven and the baggage check and all that stuff. Jesus basically communicates to me that we all belong there. We all are invited on this journey, every single one of us. And right at the heels of him saying that, I hear in my left ear here from the room next to me, Desperate Housewives, I hear someone yell something like, rise up. If we all do it together, we can't be denied, or something like that. Like storm the gates.
Conquers all of that, and we bring all of that kicking and screaming, check your baggage, we forgive you too, all the way up to the highest level of forgiveness and love. In the background over there's like, rise up, people, if we do it together. Like they literally played this in the room next to me.
And I was like, holy moly, he just got done telling me, y'all, that we all belong here, every single one of us. And then I heard that. And again, it's one of these moments where I know I have the Messiah right in front of me, but I need to follow this sign. And so I ran into the next room, and this is what I saw.
Are we still having a problem?
Yes, we still are. Doesn't it piss you all off that we're stuck in our gilded cage, forbidden to go to interesting seminars just because we're +1s?
No, this is fun. I really feel like I'm in Japan.
This is the United States of America in the 21st century, not some oppressive patriarchal regime. It may be small and red, but this lanyard is no better than a burqa.
Oh dear.
We need to storm the gates and demand to be let inside.
If you're not going to use the rest of your flowers, can I?
Come on, rise up. If we do it together, we will not be denied.
4 o'clock, people. I think you've all earned a cocktail.
No, do not drink those. Those are the cocktails of oppression made from equal parts tyranny and blind obedience and... Oh, screw it.
Now, I know that doesn't overlap entirely with the biblical Jesus, right? Specifically that last part where she takes the wine and says, oh, screw it, and drinks it herself. Like, Jesus didn't sin. Like, that kind of symbolized that he recognized that we sinned and he decided, oh, whatever, I'm going to sin too. That's not what I interpret from that, y'all. What I interpret is that he understood our plight and that he felt our pain. Just the exact same things that he communicated to me earlier. But specifically the part where she's saying, hey, basically what's happening in that scene, y'all, is she's at a business conference with her husband, and she's a +1, and the +1s go to this like silly little arts and crafts things, while their husbands go to the awesome business meetings, and she wanted to be in the awesome business meeting. To her, that is heaven, right? In this analogy. And so she is trying to show everyone that they don't have to be like the underlings here and like the dregs that are just, oh, go off in the corner and do your arts and crafts. It's like, we all belong there. And so her saying, rise up. If we rise up, we won't be denied, and, storm the gates and everything. It gives me goosebumps, y'all. I mean, again, I'm goosebumping right now. It's not focusing. To me, it's amazing that that overlap of that happening exactly in that moment to me is absolutely freaking amazing. And it's once again an example. I don't know how many times this has happened, y'all. If you remember that one episode, The Intervention, where there was the wedding dress of my wife, which is right here, and overlapping with that synchronistically, my wife was watching Army Wives, which again, it's always about wives, isn't it? The Desperate Housewives and Army Wives. But this guy is basically giving a wedding speech almost, it sounded like. And it was, and there were so many examples of that overlapping in that one too. And then the Cups episode overlapping there. And I could just keep going on and on, y'all. To me, it's just like, wow. If any other psychonauts have experienced that kind of phenomenon, please comment and let me know, because surely I'm not the only one who's experienced this. But again, to me, this is further validation and further proof for me that this stuff is real, and not only real, but realer than real, because how can regular reality pull something like that off? The only way that something like that is possible, in my opinion, is if there's a higher reality pulling the strings for this lower reality that we're in. And so, once again, either I'm overthinking this, or there's something to do with psychedelics. There's something to do with the visions that you see on psychedelics. There's something to do with the entities that you see on psychedelics. And I just happen to see Jesus, for crying out loud. And so, again, I'm amazed. And so that was very powerful. But the craziest part of this whole experience for me, or maybe not the craziest, but one of the most amazing parts, was when I re-entered the room. Here's what happened there.
And so I was in here watching, that scene on Desperate Housewives. Right now, my wife is watching The Walking Dead. There she is, right there. Say hi.
Hi.
So got her on camera. But anyway, so I rounded the corner after watching that scene and being blown away by it. Rounded the corner here. I'm just like, can't believe it. I come into the room, and this is the first thing that I see right here. 2 shoes awaiting my feet.
And now I'm coming into a room that has... I literally walked into a room that has disciple sandals waiting for my arrival. 2 of them perfectly aligned. He said that wasn't an accident. You didn't do that. I did. There are no accidents. There's no way that I would have taken... They still have feet imprints in them. Are those your feet? Am I touching the feet? You said, can I kiss your feet earlier? Can I? He said, kiss them, they're yours. Like he's inviting me. Like you know how we say, oh, it's yours. Like, this house is yours. My house is your house. So he's saying, kiss them, they're yours. In that regard, but he's also saying, kiss them, they are yours. These feet that you kiss are literally your feet. That's why the shoes were awaiting your presence. They were perfectly placed here. This is not me. I don't do this. Where did these shoes come from? They weren't here. Those shoes were not there. I was sitting there. They would have been underneath my left butt cheek, and they were not there. What are they doing there perfectly aligned, sir? For me to walk in and see this? How are they perfectly aligned, awaiting my feet? In this perfect, beautiful symbol of discipleship, obedience. Here are your slippers, sir. Kiss the feet, they are yours. My house is your house. This is how you extend a hand towards Jesus. And he reciprocates that hand 10 billion fold. Y'all, those slippers were not there. Those shoes were not there. They weren't there. I did not wear those shoes today. Eternal life, this guy says. And there are my shoes. And they aren't bespeckled with jewelry. These shoes served their purpose, which was to put some cushion underneath the man's feet so he didn't wear himself to death on day number 1 of his existence down here. All your gold-plated sneakers, that's all part of it too. I don't want to hear that crap anymore, y'all. These are our sneakers right here. And they aren't sneakers. These are not comfortable. They're not gold-plated. But they are infinite. And we all need to find that in ourselves. Otherwise, we are all doomed. We're going to spell out our own level, the furthest level of forgiveness down here. That people say is like the lowest level of Dante's Inferno. We're in it, y'all, if we don't recognize that which is within ourselves already. Kiss the feet. They're yours. Those are some tough shoes to fill, buddy. It's cosmically terrifying.
And so after that epic monologue, which I actually cut short for this video, but after this epic monologue, I realized I was yabbering too much and missing out on this opportunity here to fill these shoes, right? And so, but before I get to the next part, y'all, just want to point out I want to zoom in or get close to these and point out that these toe markings here are my toes. Again, these are really old, and after years and years of wear and tear or whatever, my toes have left an imprint on these shoes. But in the moment, these were Jesus's footprints. It's like Jesus put his shoes here for me to wear, and these were his footprints. So when I was like, "Sir, are these your feet? Can I kiss them?" It was like, and it's almost like, when someone, I don't know, takes a shirt or something and they throw it on a bed. Like, I'm just going to throw this shirt that I have laid out that my wife will be angry that I have laid out. But like when you throw something on the bed, you see it kind of like fall, and you see that kind of like that I don't know, the air kind of like pushing out of it, and it takes a while for it to fully depress. It almost had that look to it. I'm not joking around. It's as if when I approached these shoes, it was like someone had just taken their feet out of them, and you could see it kind of like depressing like that. It was very unbelievably amazing, y'all. It was absolutely freaking unbelievably amazing, especially considering that I had no idea how these shoes got here. Like, unbelievable. And so, realizing I was wasting time, though, I went ahead and stepped into the shoes, and immediately upon doing so, y'all, I collapsed. I collapsed in pure and utter exhaustion. I mean, between being smote by the Archangel Gabriel and this epic conversation with Jesus and this cosmically terrifying being that was rotting my face off and throwing diarrhea at me and trying to rip me down into hell, I was exhausted. And so I basically kind of turned my head to Jesus as he kind of started to fade away, and he told me something about sleeping itself, right? Because it's very easy for you to be so passionate and excited about maybe not excitement's probably not the word. It's your duty. You're so bound by duty with what you have to do now that it's very easy to imagine like, oh, well, I'm not going to sleep ever again. Like, every single thing that I do in my life is now going to be devoted to this cause, and there is no sleep. And Jesus basically told me in so many words as he was fading away that that's not how this works. To bring up mountaineering again, it's already courageous for a mountaineer to climb Mount Everest or Mount Denali or something like that, right? But it's absolutely foolish for that mountaineer to choose the hardest impossible path up the mountain. There's a difference between courage and stupidity, right? And so he basically let me know that it's okay to rest. It's okay to sleep. He was human and he slept, and he had to. Otherwise, he would have killed him. He would have died before he would have been able to spread any useful knowledge or information or forgiveness and love. And so basically, he conveyed to me in so many words that there's a handoff, an optimization of sorts, where you do everything you can in the waking light of day. You do your job, and you don't be lazy, right? You sleep and you rest when the job is done, right? And so, but when that job is done, you hand the baton off to rest. You hand the baton off to sleep, because what happens in sleep? Regeneration, all the regenerative things that happen in sleep, neurogenesis, muscles being rebuilt, flushing toxins out of your body and everything, y'all. It's your body is still working and optimizing what you did the previous day and getting you ready for the next day. And so the optimal, most efficient way of continuing that momentum is to get proper rest and proper sleep. So there's nothing wrong with that. And so he kind of lulled me to sleep in that regard as I went to sleep. And that sleep was quickly interrupted, though, by my wife, who had been waiting to eat, right? I'd only been laying there for maybe 5-10 minutes before my wife came in and said she was hungry, and I was hungry too. And we went to go get some pizza. I'm going to step in here where there's a little more light. It's getting kind of dark here. But I'll just turn on some lights. Why not? But so when we were at the pizza place, a lot of amazing things happened. I wasn't fully done with the experience. I still saw some very trace amount of kind of psychedelic stuff. Like, I mean, you really had to look for it, mind you, but there was still some like intersecting geometric lines and stuff like that. Maybe a tiniest of tiny bit of fractal kind of stuff going on. I didn't drive, by the way. She did. She's stone cold sober. But regardless, I saw a little bit of that stuff. But the things that really popped out at me, pun intended, were eyeballs. Every once in a while, out of the corner of my eye, I would see this flash of these two really intensely staring you down eyeballs, and they were the eyeballs of Jesus Christ. And I know this because I had just got done looking into those eyes for the past like hour and a half. And so everywhere, just about everywhere I'd look, in the corner of my eye, I would see a flash of those eyeballs. And it was quite amazing. But also, whenever I would close my eyes, I would see a flash like staring directly at me. Really, really amazing stuff. And it was kind of like a stark reminder of my mission. Again, his 1,000-yard stare, y'all. It's a commanding presence. It's a call to action. And so these are just like little gentle reminders of what my new task is, right? But one thing that really leapt out at me probably the most in this post experience while I'm having pizza with my wife. By the way, shout out to Gypsy Poet, best pizza in Houston. I'm sitting there in the pizza joint with her, and just like those memes I told you about with the guys picking the fruit or whatever, and then you squint your eyes and hold it out at a distance and you can see the face of Jesus, that happened in that moment, and I have a picture of it. Like, granted, there's a little bit of psychedelic effects still going on, so what I saw looked exactly like the face of Jesus. This picture that I'm going to show you, you're really going to have to use your imagination to see a face here, but I think you'll see a face. I don't think you may not see the face of Jesus, but I think you'll see a face. Like, I see eyeballs there. I see like a beard. I see a nose. It's amazing to me that the very day, a mere like hour, or maybe 2 hours or 2.5 hours after I saw the face of Jesus Christ in one of those like, similar to one of those memes or whatever. That's, when I first saw his face, it was like that. 2.5 hours later, I see that in real life and have a picture of it. It was unbelievable. And so that kind of spelled the end of that experience. That was kind of the last thing. And other than that, my wife and I had an absolutely amazing day. So much love. It was just awesome. And I was confident, based on everything that happened, between the Archangel Gabriel saying that a miracle is going to happen. Basically, he says, trust the signs. It'll work. All this stuff. I was confident that we were going to go in for that third ultrasound and get a heartbeat, and that we were going to be good to go with the pregnancy, right? and 9 short months we will have a baby daughter. And so that kind of was the send-off of this extreme confidence. And the integration that happened thereafter, y'all, which always happens after psychedelic experiences, integration and these amazing synchronistic events that echo the themes of the trip. What happened in terms of integration after this trip, y'all, was just heartbreakingly beautiful and amazing. And just, we're going to cover it in part 2 of this trip report. So we're going to do a part 2 covering that. And then we're going to do an unpacking episode of what really happened and what it all means. And, because we all know what happened, right? I had that emotional breakdown. I'm going to put that into perspective and tell you exactly where I am now on my path. And I think where I landed is a place that is actually stronger than I was before, but more vulnerable at the same time. And I'll get into the reasons why on that unpacking episode, y'all. It's going to be absolutely it's going to be intense, and it's going to challenge everything that you thought about my channel, about me, about my takeaways about God and psychedelics and signs and synchronicities and all this stuff, y'all. We kind of have to. I'm going to hold my tongue. I'm going to bite my tongue until that episode comes out, y'all. But that's all I got for today. I appreciate any of you who have stuck around this long. This is another long one. But I actually did cut this one down quite a bit because previous recordings that I did of this were almost 3 hours. So I spared y'all quite a bit. Stuck with only the important stuff. So I love you all, and I'll see you on the next episode. See ya.